Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Women Inspiration mini series with me. I am Lakshmi Rajaram, and every week I introduce and bring to you women from our Twin Cities community who have some exceptional talent, a unique perspective to share, a passion, or their community service. And today, Radha Chavali is joining me. She is a global director of a multinational manufacturing firm here in the Twin Cities. She is a mom to two lovely teenage daughters. But she is here today to talk to me about, yes, you guessed it from this background, your personal brand. So before I get going into this, please help me in welcoming Radha Chavali to this program. Hi, Radha. Welcome to the program. How are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful. You are here today to talk to me and to this audience about your personal brand. So I want to start by asking you, Radha, what is a brand and what's the difference between a brand as we understand it, like a product related brand, as opposed to a personal brand?
Absolutely. Before I go there, I first of all want to say, I want to thank you to give this opportunity. The speakers before me, such impressive women all over Twin Cities. So I feel very grateful to be part of that wonderful group of women. And thank you, first of all, doing this. And it is extremely empowering. And I'm very appreciative of this platform you're creating. And I think that's part of your personal brand. We'll definitely go into that. I mean, I will be the first one to acknowledge, right? You know, there are like a lot of people probably thinking we are in these unprecedented times. There's just so much going on. Does your brand matter? This is corporate speak at the end of the day. How does that matter? And that is probably where we want to kind of talk about how it is something that is with you no matter what. It is like your shadow. It is, that is essentially what it is. Whether you like it or not, your personal brand is something that you show the world every day without your knowledge potentially. So why not make it a powerful thing and use it to do some good at the end of the day, right? So we all are very familiar with several brands, like, the product brands that you're talking about, Lakshmi, whether you talk about Amazon Prime, you talk about a Netflix, or you talk about a Tesla. There are certain images and certain attributes and expectations that just come to your mind because that's top of mind. When you hear something, that's the first thing you think about. That is essentially a product brand. Just like that, people also have a brand about them.
That was a question I had, is how do we make sure that there is a clear differentiation between
Absolutely.
a label, putting a label on somebody versus a personal brand?
Absolutely. And that is a very important distinction. And people usually do confuse between the two because there is some amount of overlap, but there is a very clear distinction in the perspective. A label is always an external group of people potentially, putting something on you. A brand is always you, the authentic you. Think about who are you when nobody is watching and there is not a judgment that is coming your way. So now we talked about label. Label is a perception of you in somebody else's eye. But a brand, your personal brand, is essentially, in the simplest of terms, I would say it is a combination of three things, right? Every one of us have an inherent strength, whatever that might be. That's the first piece. A set of strengths that you are innately born with, that's one piece. The second piece is there is a certain amount of passion you have for certain things. It could be cooking, it could be art, it could be organizing something, it could be any number of things, but there is a certain amount of passion associated with it, and that you might have grown to nurture and strengthen as you grew older. And the third piece is inspiration. There are certain things that happen, or there are certain things that you are exposed to in your experiences that actually create certain inspirations to you. So
Mhm.
your brand is essentially what is your strength, what is your passion, and what inspires you. Think
Mhm.
about all of those together, and that is what your personal brand ends up being, right?
Wow. That's great, Radha. That is so wonderful. So all of us, to some extent, have a brand. Maybe we strengthen that brand, or shape it, or evolve it as we go through life, as we get new experiences. As you know, many times life throws situations at us, and
Absolutely.
how we present ourselves, how we choose to respond ourselves, is part of that inherent brand that we carry with us. So
Absolutely.
thinking along those lines,
Mhm.
these past 2.5, 3 months, right, have been anything but normal. I think at a
Absolutely.
global, worldwide scale, life has thrown something extremely challenging to everybody. I wanted to set the context there. I'm sure a lot of people have similar thoughts and questions around this time frame. So help us navigate that a little.
Absolutely. And I think it's absolutely disingenuous to talk about a personal brand without acknowledging where we are today, the unprecedented times that, none of us are old enough to have gone through in 1918 with the flu pandemic that the world has seen the last time around. So this is absolutely brand new for 99% of the population that is out there. And it's always challenging when challenging times come, or times when you have no control, very little control, maybe that's what I can say, I guess, very little control on the outcomes.
Mhm.
um, that is the time who you are as a person becomes that much more important,
Important.
right? The very first thing I would acknowledge is this, right? I don't know how many times all of us have heard, we're all in this boat together,
Yeah.
right? um, that is only partially true. I think what is true is, we are all in the same storm, but perhaps not on the same boat, right?
Oh, very insightful, Radha. I agree with you. Continue. Yeah,
Right.
that's
And so there might be some of us who the only thing that's missing is the weekend parties, or the vacation that you probably planned that you couldn't go through. Other than that, the rest of your life is largely untouched.
mm,
Then there are other people who probably either lost their job overnight, or if you're self-employed, maybe your income got cut in half overnight.
mm-hmm,
That's a very, very, or you have a health situation where you're not able to get an elective surgery, you have to live through that.
mm-hmm,
These are very, very, very different experiences. Yes, in the same storm, but you might be on a cruise ship, and I might be in a little paddle boat or a tugboat right next to you.
mm-hmm.
So that is something that you want to acknowledge for yourself, and be kind to yourself. First of all, that is a very important thing. At the end of the day, whatever your brand is, your experience, what you're going through, don't undermine what you're feeling,
Mm,
right? That is a very first thing I would say. Be kind to yourself. I'll give you a simple example, right? I have a daughter who's going to be graduating high school.
yes.
Obviously, the last few months of high school are usually very, very uh, um, important in that experience of a high school senior. They have the prom, they have the senior day, skip day, this, that, and everything else. Obviously, they have not had any of those. In fact, even their graduation has been postponed, and hopefully it'll happen at some point. But that is a grief that that child has. I can certainly turn around and say, hey, there are close to 100,000 people who are dead. Why are you worried about your prom not happening or your high school graduation not happening? I think it's just unfair for us to not acknowledge that every grief has
It's
its
important.
place, and
Yeah,
there is no reason for us to belittle one compared to other,
correct.
right? That's the very first thing I would say in a situation like this. And then the second thing is, once you maybe get comfortable with being okay with your situation, then taking a stock and saying, now knowing what I know, I can do this much, or something ginormous,
Mm,
So figuring out what is okay for you in your situation is important.
But what you said was a very important point, is that everybody is grieving in their own way.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
it's very important, one, to allow them to do that, to acknowledge that, to, support them wherever support might be needed. um,
absolutely.
and to just empathize with that, everyone may not be on your boat, as you put it. So you talked a little bit about these unprecedented times, and
Mm-hmm,
how one can still stay true and still build a powerful brand, because with all the work, especially with all the women that I've been interviewing, and
mm-hmm,
uh,
mm-hmm,
different things in the different ways in which they've shown up, um,
mm-hmm.
might even be different from what they were doing earlier, or what their careers were
Absolutely.
based
Mm-hmm,
in. But they're just showing up in a way to inspire others, to motivate others, and that's
mm-hmm.
become a part of their brand. That's not their only brand, but it's kind of got added on to something that they were previously doing, right? And
Absolutely.
so
I mean, and we have examples galore, right? I will talk about personally what I got inspired by. There was this 14-year-old child who's never sewed in her life, no experience, not whatsoever, right? At the beginning of this pandemic, knowing that, there was a big shortage of PPE, you know, she goes to her parents, and, this is, someone that I know since she was a young child. She goes to her parents and says, buy me a sewing machine. I want to do something about it. So they bought her a sewing machine. She learned how to sew from scratch, right? First principles.
mm,
And she started stitching face masks and became the Fit and Fab, PPE team member.
yeah.
And this is not something, you can teach somebody. This is something that came inherently based on her strength of being very empathetic. And then the second piece is she had a passion to help, and she got inspired by the other women in what the community was doing, and she started doing something that can add value to the overall outcome, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the list of such inspirational stories from every generation is just beyond something that I can, behold. It's so wonderful to see the way that our community has stepped up in all ages, in all ways, whatever
Absolutely.
talent you may have or not have. I was the first one to raise my hand and said, I know nothing about sewing. I've never sewn in my life
Same
before.
here, right?
I
Absolutely.
don't, I don't own a machine. But you find your own little niche. You find your way in which, if there is a will, if there is a desire that you want to, show up in a certain way, it is
Absolutely.
possible. It is absolutely possible.
Yeah.
Radha, this was so wonderful. To wrap up here, what words of advice and encouragement, inspiration do you have for the women out there, particularly around this theme of branding?
So I would say maybe three or four things that, and I don't know if I can inspire. I can essentially tell you, what I have, been experiencing, and what I'm trying to go back to every single time, I'm in a place where it's just a little overwhelming. What do you kind of go back to? I would say, be kind to yourself. Don't Social media can be a really interesting double-edged sword. It can be amazing, in terms of connecting, inspiring, and, lifting a set of people beautifully, or it can also be a place of great amount of anxiety. Figure out where you are and be kind to yourself. Recognize that, your brand, even if you're working from home as a corporate employee, that still is coming through when you're working from home. So
Absolutely.
just don't underestimate that, because those are the things that are silently being acknowledged and noted, and have some routine, even if you're home. Doesn't matter. I think, those are the three big things I would say, and that actually helps you in a lot of different ways. At least, those are the things I'm latching on to. And, finally, if you have certain passions that give you so much joy, right? Continue doing it. I don't know, people know, but there is a app called Star Maker, where you can sing duets on a karaoke track. And we started singing some of these old tunes, and we started making duets with my dad. And I
Oh,
gotta tell you, that was like the single most inspiring moment for me. It was a simple thing, but the joy that my dad derived out of it has been so immense. And so nothing, however small or however big it is in your eyes, you don't know how it would be perceived and received by the other person.
Small things like that. I know my mom was my first student for my artwork, and on long distance through FaceTime and through WhatsApp videos and Zoom calls, I taught my mom how to do this kind of painting, and she loved it. And to see her beaming and to see her excited about something like this just gives you tremendous joy. So this is wonderful, Radha. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to everybody out there about how we can show up with our authentic self, our personal brand, how we can choose to strengthen our brand in spite of what the situation might be. There are so many examples you cited, so many ways in which we can be more kind to ourselves and to people around us. So thank you again, and I wish you a wonderful day, and I hope to meet you soon. Take care.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.